Welcome everyone to a special edition webinar with Angela Spearman. She hosts the Sunday night drop-in group for betrayed partners on our platform. She also facilitates the betrayed partner work group on our platform. The next one will be starting March 4th. So you can find both of those on Seeking Integrity. But Dr. Rob and Erin Snell, our clinical director, were both unavailable tonight. So the first person I reached out to is Angela, and she had a topic that we thought could be really valuable for people to consider. As always, it's take what you need and leave the rest. We want healing and recovery, and we have lots of resources to promote that, and it's always people's choice. So we're going to get started. Angela, I'm going to turn it over to you. You may even want to preface this with why this topic, what's been coming up, lately. But I know you've got some slides to share, so I'm just going to let you take it away.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tammy. So, I come into a space like this with a desire to bring hope, to show that there are options, there are ways that we can heal. But I don't want to try to come in here and convince somebody that our way is, exactly what you need to do. This is a learning journey for everybody in a crisis, everybody in such a tragedy as infidelity and betrayal, or addiction, struggling with these behaviors. This is a very difficult thing to go through, and nobody wakes up and says, I want to become an addict, or I want to struggle with this, or I'm gonna, be a miserable partner, right? Like nobody wants that for themselves. We got here somehow, and it's each person's individual unique journey, kind of learning what some of those stepping stones are. What is the path, and then what are some of the jewels that we want to pick up that we can carry with us into whatever crisis awaits us later in life, right? This isn't the last crisis we're going to go through, the last crisis we'll experience. And relationships are especially challenging. They require so much resilience and so much commitment to really soothe ourselves and pause and not rush through things, to reduce that sense of urgency so that we're making more clear decision making, right? And understanding that whatever it is that's going on, this isn't going to get cleared up in one night. This is something that takes time. And when we can do that, that can help reduce some of the pressure on us, which is often what's driving very, very strong emotions, is this fear that something awful has happened, and it has, and we've got to fix it now. Well, this isn't something that's quickly or easily fixed, right? And so when we can adjust some of those expectations, reduce that sense of urgency, you'll notice at least a little bit of relief will come in for you. Okay, so I come to this group tonight wanting to talk about many of the challenges that I see in my work as a CSAT, places where people get hung up, whether you are the person who cheated or the person who was betrayed. Resentment is one of those things that comes up in all relationships because relationships are complicated, right? So even outside of such a crisis situation, resentment is inevitable. Okay. Resentment, I want to start out by saying it's an emotion, right? And so emotions are messy and they shift and they change, and we don't always understand why we're having that emotion. And so we're just going to talk about this with some very delicate, tender approaches, and just see what you can glean from this tonight. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my presentation that I've got. There we go. Close that out. All right, Tammy, can you see that all right?
I can, yes.
Perfect.
I see your whole screen, so I don't know if you need to click
Oh,
in, but it's okay. Oh, there you go. Perfect.
okay,
Now I got it.
good. Okay, so this topic of resentment, it can actually, this resentment piece is something that fits in with anger and envy and longing. So we may need a little bit of clarification on what exactly resentment is. So emotion researchers, Doctors Brene Brown and Dr. Mark Brackett, have spent considerable effort discussing this idea of resentment. And a lot of people don't realize that it's simply an emotion. Emotions come and go. We can't control our emotions, but this particular emotion, resentment, is usually a combination of anger, disappointment, and envy. And these are because we either have a value that was trampled on, we were wronged in some way, there's some sort of an unmet need, and that results in that mixture of the anger, the disappointment, and the envy. Often there's fear that comes into play as well, and that intensifies the resentment, right? The fear of what's going to happen. What does this mean? Are we going to be able to fix this, right? And so that can sort of intensify the resentment experience. In infidelity, we have both the cheater and the betrayed partner experiencing resentment. And we're often surprised to hear that we're both experiencing resentment, right? We sort of have our own resentments and it feels like, well, yeah, of course I'm resentful of this. But to hear our partner's resentment, we start to go, wait a second, are you entitled to, like, how dare you have resentment? How dare you resent me? It feels very almost like another betrayal, right? Or another injustice when we find out that our partner is also experiencing resentment. But if you remember, resentment's an emotion. Emotions come and go, and emotions are like warning signs. They're trying to signal to us something about ourselves or something about our situation. So when we have resentments, it's important to stop and give some consideration to what is it that I'm feeling resentful of? What is the resentment in this situation? What is it telling me about myself and my values? So, like intrusive thoughts, we cannot control our emotions, but we can evoke emotions, we can soothe emotions, and we can set internal boundaries for ourselves around our emotions, right? So if an emotion is coming on, we can't stop it, just like an intrusive thought pops up. We can't stop it from popping up, but we can choose how to respond to the emotion, or we can choose how to respond to that intrusive thought. That is what we're talking about when we're dealing with resentment. We can choose how we respond to the resentment. What are the resentments telling me about my values? What do I want for myself? So starting by acknowledging, oh, I'm feeling resentment, do what I can to soothe my nervous system, right? When we start to have all of those complex emotions that we ball together and call resentment, we're going to be feeling that in our body. And so to be able to soothe our bodies and maybe soothe some of the fears by reducing urgency, right? Like that's one strategy that helps a whole lot when we're trying to address or be tender towards ourselves when we're feeling resentment. Then exploring, what is the value behind this? What was the need that was trampled? What is it that I need right now? And then as we become more aware of our need and our value in that particular circumstance, then we can choose what kind of actions we want to take, whether it's making a request or setting a boundary or changing the game plan, right? There's many different actions that we can take. And sometimes the action is simply going to our partner and communicating how this circumstance was unfair to us, right? How this is what was unfair. This is how it impacted me. Here's a request I need to make, right? Or can we just sit and pause for a minute because this was not okay, right? And we need to honor that this wasn't okay. So resentment can be a very powerful motivator. In some ways, resentment can be very helpful. It can show us an action that we need to take. It gives us some clarity on our values and our longings and can be very empowering in that sense. But the way it's unhelpful is that it's like living with fire alarms going off 24/7, right? If you have loud blaring alarms going off at all times, that is going to wear on you, right? Even if we're trying to ignore them or we push it into the background, it's still going to be affecting us while we're trying to focus on other things. So we can try to ignore it, but that won't bring relief. And clinging to it only keeps us in that hypervigilance state, right? So when resentment moves from being helpful to unhelpful, then there are actions that we can take. So when it is protecting and providing for us, we can notice and name whatever the resentment is by noticing the sensations in our body, what kind of thoughts we're having. This requires, now this is the challenge, this requires being very honest with ourselves about reality and any disappointments that we have, right? So when I think about people who are working a recovery program, honesty with ourselves and taking life on life's terms, like all of those types of concepts, that's critical to recovery. And that's going to be the same when you are working with resentments, whether you are betrayed or the person who is trying to work a recovery program, right? So first, being really radically honest with ourselves, accepting reality is what it is, noticing that we are feeling that resentment. And then the second step is examining what are the needs, what are the values, the longings being expressed in this. And then is there a way that I can communicate this, articulate this to my partner? Are there any particular requests I want to make? Then we can't control how our partner is going to respond when we share these things, right? So let's say you're the one who's sharing your resentment. Our partner could get very angry that we're sharing this resentment. They may not be ready to hear what it is or be able to realize, oh, it's an emotion. It's not a strategy to manipulate me, right? And sometimes it is, and that needs to be addressed. But when we're talking about somebody who's saying, I'm feeling this resentment, and I think that this is what's driving this resentment, can we talk about it, right? We have no control over how our partner is going to respond to us when we're able to have that communication. And then if we're the one listening to our partner share their resentment, how can we tend to ourselves and hear, oh, this person is expressing an emotion, they're expressing a flood of intrusive thoughts that they've been having that's creating resentment for them. And I may not be able to fix it for them, but I can listen and learn and maybe observe where they are in their recovery and healing process, offer my presence and remind them I may not be able to fix whatever this resentment is, but I can be here and I can listen. And if there's something that we want to do to try to brainstorm and find a way to move forward, right, then let's do that together. So then step number 3 is for us within ourselves, when we're the one experiencing resentment, consider what action we might like to take, including soothing ourselves. If there's a grudge that can be released, how I might start practicing releasing that. Not everything can be released, right? Some things need to be worked through and processed before we can release it. And that's good, that's healthy. When we're angry and we're hurt, there's a reason why. And to just shove it down and ignore it is not going to help anything. So that's why I included in step number 3, revisiting what part of reality do I still need to accept? What things can I release? We learn that we deal with the things that we can and we release the things that we can't, right? If it's not in our control, then we do what we can with what we can do, right? With what's in our control. Okay. So when resentment is disempowering, let me pause here actually. Tammy, do you have any thoughts before I move any further into the presentation? I see you taking notes.
Well, I'm taking, yes, lots of notes. So even going back to the complex emotion, because I was thinking like, okay, anger, if you're angry, there's, there's anger to deal with, or hurt underneath it. But what I hear you saying with this is it feels like resentment is a bundle of emotions. Is that always the case? And are all of those part of it? Or, could there be other, strands of emotion?
Yeah. So those are the primary emotions that are associated with it. I know that there are some others at times. Sometimes somebody will experience a resentment and respond to that resentment with manipulation rather than with sort of entering into a personal humility of, wow, I feel resentment. And what can I do for myself? What's within my control about this resentment? Some people will choose to manipulate or lash out or feel rage, and that actually fuels that fire of resentment. It increases the resentment when that's the response. But if you keep in mind, a resentment is an emotion. And so how we respond to that emotion is what will either help improve our situation or potentially make it worse.
And I made a note, what do I want for myself? And I wrote down, I can't make this unhappen because, like the quick answer is, I want this to not have happened. Well,
Yes.
that's too late. And, when we talk about that, and Dr. Eddie Caparucci has talked about that, and he was quoting Dr. Gabor Mate. So, that's a common theme in this work is we can't make these things unhappen. So here's where we're at, and how do we move forward? I wrote down, in number one, of, it's, notice a name, with this. And I was like, acceptance. And in the 12-step materials, acceptance is the answer to all my problems today, and it's not like that we have to go, oh, I accept that everybody's this way and all of that kind of stuff. I have to accept that this is where I'm at right now. This is my reality. I can't make that unhappen. Here's where I am right now. I'm accepting that. And how do I move forward? Which I really think of, like is also part of your number three. What part of reality do I still need to accept and release? I have to be aware of, this is how things are, as much as I, can wish and want things to be different. I have zero control over another human being. I only, can address my actions and my reactions. That is a hard fought, learning, for me in recovery, and it's empowering. So, I'm excited for you as you're flipping to how it's disempowering, like that's the last thing we want for anybody, particularly betrayed partners, to be disempowered. We want, healing and Angela and I were talking earlier, and I said, like we're in the hope business. There is healing. Nobody has to stay stuck. Everybody gets to choose, and we want there to be real resources that make a difference, on this journey for people. So please, with all of this stuff, understand the ultimate goal is healing and hope, for moving forward. However, like Angela said, your partner may go, yeah, I'm angry at you or whatever, that you have a resentment towards me. You have no control over that. But we sure want to give you tools to use so that you can, soothe and release the resentment. And one more thing, and then I promise I'll shut up. But you're talking about with a partner, but this is humans. You said it at the beginning, like if you're in a relationship with another human being that you have any connectedness with, like if it's somebody in the grocery store, who cares? You could still get a resentment, at the grocery store. But if you do, if you're in any kind of relationship, there is a chance, for this complex emotion stuff to come up and have a resentment. So learning tools that serve you well in all areas of your life, so that you're not, shackled to resentment, it is an opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm glad that you asked the first question that you asked was, are there other emotions? I want to talk real briefly. There are let's see, one, two, three, four, five facets of impact that resentment will have on us. And so
Mm.
it starts with emotional impacts, right? So emotionally, when we're experiencing resentment, it's also ushering in things like fear, anxiety, hopelessness, depression, sadness, anger, rage, grief. I mean, like resentment really makes space for a lot of very big emotions, and they don't reside easily. Somehow it helps maintain a lot of those so they don't come and go, right? It keeps that intensity raised. Um, Physical impact is loss of energy, tightness in chest and muscles, exhaustion. You can actually develop diseases and have real medical issues, autoimmune diseases. And this can come from the cortisol and the stress in your body from maintaining these resentments, right? And letting those linger. The mental impact is rumination, intrusive thoughts, thoughts that you really don't want to be having. You'd much rather be thinking about something pleasant than this, but these intrusive thoughts keep coming up. Difficulty concentrating, difficulty mentally relaxing to where you can feel curious about something, feel creative, problem solving. All of that is pushed to the side because that fight or flight response kicks in when you're carrying resentment, right? Because you're trying to protect yourself, you're trying to provide for yourself. Relationally, the impact is that you experience everything as combative rather than collaborative. And these are even people who maybe didn't do anything that stirred up the resentment for you. Just because you're carrying around the resentment, you're carrying around sort of that hypervigilance, and it creates a globalized mistrust. And so now you're feeling unsafe in all of your relationships, not just in this one relationship, right? And then the meaningful / spiritual impact is that you start having a narrative now that people are bad. You'll never be able to trust people again. The world is bad, right? So it has this very meaning / spiritual impact on us as well. So we can see that it can have very harmful impacts when it moves from being helpful to unhelpful. Okay. Any thoughts on that, Tammy, before I?
No, I agree. And even with the spiritual, like, you hear, why did God, for those that have God, why did God let this happen? That type of thing. So can he even erode, connections to, a higher power?
Yeah. Yeah. Man, resentment is it's got such a ripple effect. And we know we don't like it. We don't like the way it feels in our body, but we often don't know what to do with it, right? So let's move on in our slides then. So obviously, if we are focusing our thoughts around the things that we are resentful of and what's causing the resentment, that's just going to keep that resentment going for us. It's going to keep the anger, the rage intensified. We'll begin to feel more entitled. We'll have very reactive, abusive behaviors. And this means that when we are in that state and we're having those experiences, it's very difficult for us to act in congruence with our values, right? If we say, I barely recognize myself anymore after all of this betrayal, or I barely recognize myself as I'm in all of this addiction, which is often driven by resentments, right? Resentments keep us in our addictions. It's so difficult to behave and act in congruence with our values. But ultimately, like Tammy was saying, that's picking a fight with reality, right? And reality is always going to win, right? And so being able to shift our thoughts to what is in my control. I can't control others. If I have no way of controlling how the other person in my life is going to respond, whether or not they'll respect my needs or be able to soothe themselves enough to be available to emotionally be tender and present with me, right? Because they've got their own shame that they're trying to work through. That's another thing I wanted to mention about resentment. When we have feelings of resentment, it's always going to hook our shame. And when shame is hooked, it drives us into numbing behaviors. It drives us into avoidance behaviors, things that just try to numb out all of that shame. And so shame and resentment are like this. Well, my colleague, Hal Stewart, he describes it as like the snake that's eating its own tail, right? Shame and resentment both seem to have that effect where the more you are experiencing it, the more you're going to experience it, right? So here's a little activity that we can do. If we want, it's just a brief activity. Notice right now, if you just pause, put your hand on your heart. Notice what resentment feels like in your body right now. Again, we all have resentment. Life is complicated. Brene Brown, in her book Atlas of the Heart, says that she uses a strategy to help her understand which values have been trampled on when she's feeling resentment. And she asks herself this question: what mean and critical thing am I rehearsing saying to the person I feel resentful toward? And maybe you get out a piece of paper and you write all of that down, all of the thoughts that you want to say, all the mean things, all the critical things, all the accusations, all of the questions. What is it? Just write all those down on a separate piece of paper, as many pages as it takes to fill it, right? To get it all out. And then look for the patterns. What's the values that's being expressed in that? What value was trampled? Right? What need was not met? What was unfair about the circumstance that's leading to this flood of complicated experiences of resentment feelings, right? Then as you're examining what those needs and values are, then ask, how is this resentment trying to protect me and provide for me? Is there a particular action that I can take that will help me live more congruent with my values, live a life of the values that I want for myself, getting my needs met in healthy ways, right? Returning to a feeling of integrity. And then soothing ourselves, taking those actions. And then one of the things that I wanted to encourage, I might have this on the next slide. No, I stopped there. Another thing that my colleague Hal likes to say is, when resentment comes knocking on your door, like intrusive thoughts, you can open the door, converse with it, learn something from it, be curious about it. But you don't want to invite it in and eat dinner with it and invite it to spend the night with you, right? So that's where our own personal internal boundaries come in, where we can recognize that maybe this has some value, but at some point it crosses from being helpful to unhelpful. And what do I want to do as a result of that? I don't want it to linger. And so there are some mantras that you can develop for yourself when you feel it knocking at your door. I put one here on the screen. It says, I have chosen to stop ruminating when thoughts of injustice visit me. I hope my partner learns, finds courage, and chooses healing and integrity. Here, with that simple 2 sentences, we're acknowledging that I cannot control my partner and I can take action, right? And so those are the 2 things that we're talking about here. This is not I'm helpless in this situation. There's nothing I can do. No, I can. There are things that I can do. There are actions that I can take and ways that I can articulate my needs. And I must release outcomes, right? I learned that I can support myself. Other phrases that I have written down are, I've taken action and I can reassess tomorrow. I can find the words and courage to communicate my needs. And I don't have to rush. This won't be fixed overnight. Right? So these one sentence, 1 or 2 sentence things that we can say, maybe we put it on an index card and we keep it in our pocket, or we put it in our phone and we get out and we read it anytime we have strong feelings of resentment. There are strategies, there are things that we can do, and it's just an emotion. Resentment is an emotion that we're feeling, and it's bringing our attention to something that needs action, right? So we don't have to beat ourselves up for having resentment. We don't have to be angry that our partner is feeling resentment. We can notice and say, okay, what is this trying to tell us, right? What's happening within me that I would be having these resentments, or what's happening in my partner that would cause my partner to have those resentments? And what do we want to do now? How do we want to proceed together? Can we collaborate on finding a solution, right? Which isn't always possible, right? Depending on where you are in your recovery and healing. Okay, so we surrender what can be surrendered and we work out the rest. Right. Okay.
Sounds so easy.
I know it sounds so
No,
simple.
so, but like with this slide you have up, like I was like I had to smile, which is not a good thing, on this one, because I was like, oh, what mean and critical thing am I rehearsing saying to the person I feel resentful towards? And I know that this is partner focused. Like, I'm in a relationship that is not where my resentments go. It's like other things. I'm a runner. I can run literally miles rehearsing whatever, and I can have a scathing tongue. So the good news is I, think it all, but I've wasted miles of a run in a beautiful whatever, you know, having all, I mean, I literally can go, I don't even remember running that last, 2 miles or whatever. I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm wasting my life when I get caught in this loop. So I really appreciate, like, it was really a gift to be reminded this is an emotion. Emotions, I mean, they aren't real. I mean, I have a feeling about things, but that does not mean that is real. It is, there are things happening. And yes, like the other thing when you were talking about what is this trying to protect me? Same thing. I could go to immediately. Oh, I know exactly what it's trying to protect me, because if I have this whole big speech, planned and all of this kind of stuff, I'm going to get them. Like, that's ridiculous. That isn't who I want to be. Like we were talking about, am I crossing into things that I don't want to be? I don't want to be that person. I don't want to waste my life, with resentments. And I'll share really quickly, and we've got some questions. But early in my recovery, I had a massive resentment and I wasn't in a relationship. And I had a really good sponsor, and things fortunately for me were suggested, because if somebody had told me what to do, I had some willingness. I really didn't want to keep doing what I was doing, so I would listen. But they suggested that, I start thinking good things for the person I had a resentment towards. It was like really hard. Here's the other thing they said: you're letting that person live rent free in your head. That made me angry. So then I was like, okay, like, and all of the things you talked about, like the toxic, like I am wasting good energy of, that I could be putting towards good and joy. I could be paying attention to things in my life, but I'm so focused on, things that are hurtful to me. And that's always what it is. There was a hurt, there was a wound, and all of this resentment is trying to fix it, and it doesn't. It just keeps me stuck in it. So I really appreciate you bringing this topic and sharing this. And we've got some questions. So they're asking about the slides. Would you be willing to send them to me, and then I can put my email address, or how would? Okay.
Yep, I'd be more
Okay.
than happy
So
to.
so Tammy, TAMI at seekingintegrity.com. And I will have the slides and I will email them. I think there might be a way to attach them to the video when it's posted, but I'm not 100%. So I will make sure that you have it this way. Okay. So that's number one. Then the next one: I'm the betrayed wife, 7 years post D-Day. My husband has done pretty much no recovery, 2 therapy sessions and maybe 5 drop-in sessions in the first few months post D-Day. The last 3 years, I have started going out one time a month with my female coworker for dinner. After work, we have been to a few concerts, and I've also traveled one time a year to my home state to visit my best friend of 45 years. My husband has accused me of cheating since he was caught. He says he knows I am lying and has called me a whore. I'm so
Wow.
sorry. What his behavior was porn, hookup sites, talking and texting. Other women, including my sister and cousins, wife and daughters. When caught, he told me he was man of the house, entitled to do what he deserves. He says, my going out proves I won't sit at home. I told him this is controlling and abusive. He said he doesn't. He called me controlling when I caught him staring at women and more videos on his phone. He told me he just wanted to chain. He told me I just want to chain him to the table. So here's the problem. I don't see a question in this, but so Angela and I both know Debbie McCrae. She is the queen of boundaries. And she's so good at a four-part talking boundary. I know that's the story you're telling yourself and da 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 da. You've got an active addict. You've got he's emotionally abusive. I hope he's not physically abusive, and not that
Yeah.
makes it any better. But that's abuse, and he's not willing to do anything about that. So to me, this is really, what are you doing? You're doing some things to take care of yourself, but it sounds like you're kind of housemates in a pretty toxic situation. What are you thinking, Angela?
Yeah, yeah. I am so sorry that that
Yeah.
situation is sticking around for you. And I love to hear that you are going and getting your needs met in a healthy way, right? You know that
Yes.
you're not going to be able to sit down and enjoy going out to dinner with your partner when they're doing and saying things like this. So finding a female colleague who is a safe person, that means you get to go on living your life, right? And you can make requests and you can set boundaries, but you're not going to let this stop you from living your life. And that's what I like to hear. When betrayed partners are telling me that that's what they're doing, that tells me, okay, you know that there is a sunset every night, and if you want to, you can go outside and look at it, right? You can give yourself that gift of observing that sunset that's been there every night. It's just up to you to go out there and see it, right? So we don't benefit from all these wonderful things in life until we go out and participate in it. And as hurtful and difficult as our crisis situation is, there are very real ways where we can just kind of take a break and let ourselves observe a sunset, right? And that's okay. We can set down the burdens for a little while, take a little mental vacation, and then get back to it. All of those steps of, are there certain actions that I need to take right now? Are there new boundaries that I need to set? Are there some new consequences I need to explore, right? These are all wonderful things to reassess on a regular basis. But being able to say, you know what, I know I'm not going to fix all this today, and I also know I can't control my partner, means I can set it down and I can go outside and I can look at that sunset, right? Yeah. So
Well,
there's
and
there's
how
freedom.
hard, yeah, and how hard not to internalize that nasty language, like,
Yes.
yeah, coming up with your own positive messages, you
Mhm.
know like, first of all, the four-part talking boundary, but it's also like,
Yes.
yeah, like that's the story he's telling himself. This is all about him and him trying to control you. So I'm thrilled that you're going like, yeah, he's talking about you chaining him to the table, and you're going like, you're not chaining me to the table.
Yes.
I got a life out here. So I love that aspect of it.
Well done.
Okay, so the next one: how valuable is writing about resentments towards healing in our emotions?
How valuable
Like
is,
journaling, yeah, like,
well, journaling is what helps you process, right? If you aren't processing what it is that's driving these emotions, then you're just shoving it down and trying to say, I know resentment is bad for me and can be harmful for my health. And so I'm just going to do everything I can to not have resentment. But the resentment is there to serve a purpose. It is there to bring you aware of what it is that needs to happen, right? Where are things going off the rails? And then take the actions that you can take. So it's critical, right? That journaling is what's going to help you process it and get you to a place where you have enough clarity that if your partner is able to have these conversations with you, now you can go to your partner and communicate with them, right? Because you've gotten all of the ick out on paper. And now you can just come and have a very concise conversation, right? It's
Well, and
critical.
I think, yeah, I do too. And I think it's also going to help you get to what's underneath it,
Yeah.
because the resentment is an external emotion. I'm resentful of at you, but when you're journaling, you're going to go, oh, I have this resentment because I love Dr. Eddie's inner child work. So my little girl got hurt,
Mhm.
like I got rejected, I got whatever, and that hurts. And so that's really what the resentment's all about, is this happened, but it really poked all those things, and you'll be able to identify that. So even if, like Angela was talking about, going to your partner and saying, I have a resentment towards you, it could, you could even back it up if you're doing the journaling and go, when you did that, I felt rejected and I'm feeling a resentment and I want to diffuse it. Like that's that helps you come up with a language to be able to identify what's really going on,
Mhm.
because it isn't just the resentment.
Yeah. Well, and I want to bring attention to the fact that this is true for the person who's struggling with sexual behaviors as well, right? There are inner wounds, there are inner child wounds, and those need to be tended to. And when you have a resentment and you're the one who's struggling with compulsive sexual behaviors or problematic behaviors or addiction, whatever that is, whatever that looks like, that is a really important indicator to help you examine what's driving this, what's happening inside of me, and then to be really tender to ourselves. Wow, I never wanted this for myself. I didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a sex addict, right? Like I didn't set out for this to happen. How did I get here? And when I feel resentment, instead of feeling shame that I have resentment, what can I learn about myself and what's keeping me stuck instead of clinging to that resentment and then feeling entitled to engage in more of these behaviors because I'm so resentful, right? It's like a crossroads when you're at that point. And that crossroads is really important. And your partner is going to pick up on how you're responding to your resentments. Are you saying, hey, I have a sense of humility about my resentments because I want to tend to myself and be gentle to myself and learn what I can about myself and heal and grow when I feel resentment, rather than clinging to my resentment and feeling entitled and then going out and manipulating my partner out of my resentment and entitlement, right? Your partners are going to pick up on that. So I would say that this presentation is just as much for the person who is struggling with behaviors as it is the betrayed partner.
And I will share in 12-step language, it talks about, resentment is the number one offender for relapse. So for those of us that have a history of addiction, compulsive behaviors, resentments are very dangerous for us to try to hold on to them. And you can try to ignore them. Oh, wait, that's the numbing out behaviors that we used to do. So it doesn't ultimately work. So it absolutely is identifying what they are, processing through them. They can come back and we keep doing the same work, and they get different, and that's the gift of recovery if we're doing the work.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, next question. I'm the betrayed partner who has over 2 decades in this, too many D-days to count. My partner is currently writing his 4-step, working on his resentments. I felt this was my higher power at work bringing me to this webinar today. I'm so glad you're here. I haven't had him share his resentments yet, but he will be. So I'm gonna, like, as a person in recovery, that would, his 5th step is for his sponsor, his therapist, not you. So please, that, like, that you would not be set up for safety for that. So please, how can I work through what comes up for me when I see his resentments about me on the list? Again, that's like, so I'll finish reading the question. I know that all of these years of resentments are what fueled his addiction and entitlement to act out. So I'm going to post, I'm a huge 12-step fan. And like I share all the time, working steps 4 through 9, but it's with our sponsor, with our therapist. Our partners are not the recipients of all of that pardon my language, crap,
Mhm.
and a sponsor who's been through this before is going to be able to hone in. There can be sharings that come from that, we've learned and all of that. But I'm going to share, there was a webinar that Scott and I did, my colleague Scott and I did in February of last year, and we talked about, the 12-step programs and all of that. I think we need to do one more on just the steps, but like, yeah, that would be his sponsor, his therapist, hearing his fifth step. Then he gets to his list of, who he needs to make amends to. That's the list you need to be on, but that's the work for his sponsor to help guide him through that. So
Mhm.
thoughts, sorry,
Yeah.
like
No, that's
I'm a
so
huge 12-step
important.
person. So yeah.
Yes. And the thing that you were pausing on, this idea that when you see their list of resentments and you're on that list, okay. So couple things that need to be said about that. It is so important when you are working the 12 steps that you just put everything on there and not try to filter anything, because you're just trying to be as honest with yourself as possible. And so that's not the kind of thing that you're going to show your betrayed partner, because you're still just trying to work it out. You're just putting words on paper. That might not be actually how you feel. You just have to get it all out and put it on paper, and then work through it with the sponsor, work through it with the CSAT and your 12-step crowd, right? These people who are supporting you. And the things that you write down on your resentment list now, 5 years from now, you'll look back at that and go, wow, that's not what I was really feeling, but I was blaming my partner. And that was wrong of me to blame my partner, right? And my partner had nothing to do with any of that. I was struggling with my own entitlement. I was struggling with my own disappointments and my own inner child wounds and all this stuff. And I didn't know what to do with that. And so I just blamed my partner. And my partner wasn't to blame for that, right? So when you are working through this and you're doing your steps, please understand, every time you do your steps, it's going to look different. And that's why it's really important that you not read somebody else's resentment list, right? Like it's literally just trying to organize thoughts on paper and to learn what we can from the things that come out. They're not, they're not necessarily based in reality, right? These are just things that we've struggled with. So that's just really painful words that probably don't even apply, right? So we just are very cautious, and we work very hard to help people understand why that's just, you just don't read that kind of homework, don't don't put yourself through that, right? Because then you've got things that now you have to try to unhear and unlearn, and like, you don't deserve that. You deserve to be able to relax and think about things that are more real, right? that's
So,
that's
and
my thought on it.
one of the dangers with this too is if he knows you're going to read it, he can skew, and it could go either way. I don't know which, like, I'm going to put all my resentments to you, so you have to, hear them, or it can be like, oh, I'm not going to add this because I want to minimize but part of a four step is we take ownership. What is my responsibility in all of this? Like, if he's really doing the four step and he does want support with somebody who's been through this process, who knows what they're doing, because they will help clarify and pull the information together. That's why we encourage 12 steps so much, because and healthy 12 steps. So the good news is, I'm grateful he's finally working a four step. The people who putter around obviously for years and don't do the work, they don't get any of the changes, and they think that they're holding on to the valuable stuff, they acting out or whatever, or I'm afraid. And what they're really doing is they're missing out on the good stuff that recovery brings. And so I feel for you. Please hear me, partner. I
Yeah.
hear for you, feel
Yeah.
for you. And I'm going, and that addict has missed out on all of these years of, like, of healing, and out of probably poor ideas like fear. So
Mhm.
okay, would sharing the resentment with a partner be an appropriate action? Does it do any good?
That is
I bet you
such
have a
a
formula for how to do it too. So yeah.
well, I mean, that's okay. So when you share your resentments with your partner, which is an important part of check-ins, depending on where you are in your recovery and healing, right? So a highly combative relationship where you aren't able to sit down and have calm conversations, sharing resentments probably isn't going to work for your check-ins, right? It's going to have to be kept to a minimum of, here's the recovery activity as I did this week. And when I struggled, here's what I did to get back on track, right? Like, you're going to keep it to a minimum if you are in a high conflict relationship. Now, you get further on down the line and you're able to have some conversation, and the conversation actually progresses or is productive types of conversation, then you are going to use your strategies of self-soothing, really understanding what your resentments are before you present them to your partner, right? There's a lot of internal work that we've got to do with our own resentments because there are feelings. And so we need to understand, where are my feelings coming from, and not just take it to my partner and assume that it's because my partner, right, that I'm having these resentments. Right? Like, being able to first check in with ourselves. What is it that I need to know about myself? What values were trampled? In what way was this situation unfair? And what is it that I want to request from my partner when I communicate what my resentment is, that I'm struggling with this resentment? I don't want to feel resentment, but because of this situation, I'm still really struggling with this resentment. We need to take some action. Can we brainstorm how to keep this injustice or this unfairness from happening again in the future, right? So it just is going to depend on how well you're able to collaborate with each other, whether or not you can bring this and communicate it to your partner in such a way that it would be productive. And also get some very realistic expectations for yourself. Your partner is very likely to get very defensive or go into a shame spiral when you tell them that you feel resentful of something that they did, right? Like, that's a very human, normal reaction, at least until there's a lot more healing and recovery. Later on, people tend to get better at being able to receive it without shame being hooked, or they can handle their shame and still be present with you, right? But at first, there's a lot that we're all trying to learn. And when our shame is hooked, man, we can just shut down, or we can get defensive, or we can minimize, or we can withdraw and not stay emotionally present. There's a lot that happens. So this is a very tender, you just want to approach it with a lot of tenderness and have very realistic expectations. And when our partner doesn't respond in the way we need them to, give them space. See if maybe they can get their shame and their fears under control, and maybe they can come back to us and tend to whatever that was that we were bringing to them. But remove that sense of urgency and things are going to go much better for us, right? Being able to just say, okay, we may not be able to handle it today, but I'm at least going to start the conversation. And I'm not going to have huge expectations, but I am going to start articulating what my needs are, right? So it's a starting place.
And I think if you can bring it in that kind of a tone rather than, I'm sorry, I mean, like, if, you know, if you can do it in a conversational way, I need to have a difficult conversation with you. Are you open to hearing it? You know, it's kind of set it up for, you know, or can we schedule a time, you know, whatever, so that you can come at it, you know, and not at, you know, bedtime, and not, you know, like not when you're running out the door, all of those things, you know, any difficult conversation. But I really think if you can go like, you know, when this happened, I really felt, you know, rejection. I keep using that one. And therefore I'm getting a resentment. Like, so you're sharing that. Can we talk about that? You know, I want to share how I feel. Like, that's an opportunity. And Angela's right. Not everybody's going to hear it like an opportunity. And there could be some defensiveness. And then it's like, I see you're getting defensive about that. That is not my intent. My intent is to, you know, clear the air. So can we table this for now? And we'll talk about it, you know, on Tuesday night, you know, whatever, you know, but if one of you at least is remaining in your, you know, thinking part of your brain, you know, and being able to take the time out and reschedule if it's necessary, you know, you can make progress on this. Do not expect, these are difficult things. Do not expect perfection with it. But hanging on to a resentment. In fact, let's talk about that, because the next question is, my husband said that he has been secretly angry at me for 25 years when he thought I had an affair with my coworker. He said this contributed to a sex addiction. Is this resentment? I now resent him because he's trying to place blame on me for his actions. It's not okay to have been cheating on me for 25 years. I get angry because of this and have deep resentment. How do I move forward? And when I'm reading this, I was like, that to me feels like blame shifting, and he didn't fact check. So this just feels like I'm making this up as a reason that I could cheat. So if he's the addict, like, take logic out of the equation. There's always a reason and excuse. But let's talk about Angela. What does this partner do with the hurt she is experiencing and the resentment she's now developing?
Yeah. Well, this is turning into well, my partner resented me and now I resent my partner. And it's that snake eating its tail, right? It's this self-contained, reinforcing experience that we're having. And when you realize that you have resentment, which this participant is describing here, to be able to go, do I want to feel resentment? Is that what I want? Do I want to find some kind of an action that I can take so that I can start easing these feelings of resentment? Is that something I want for myself? Or am I clinging to resentment because I think that it's somehow going to protect me, right? Because resentment doesn't protect us in except when we are going, oh, what can I learn from this? Is there some kind of an action that I can take? Beyond that, it's moving into the unhelpful realm. And when you're ready to say, hey, listen, I would like to start soothing my resentments. I would like to start doing something about this. And really, the only way to do that is to articulate, right? Spend some time with it. What is it that's going on here? What are my values? What are the unmet needs? What are the actions that I can take? And then release what you can release, right? And it's a practice that you engage. It's not just a one-time decision. It is something that you engage like yoga practice, right? It's something that you engage as a way of saying, I would rather be thinking about something else when these thoughts come up. I deserve to have much more pleasant thoughts swirling around in my head than thoughts about these previous injustices, right? And so I'm doing this because I want it for myself. And I wanted to share, there is a resource that I have found helpful. This is by Kristen Neff. She is a
Yes.
PhD. She's got this mindful self-compassion workbook, and she's got a couple of chapters in there about resentments and anger in relationships and how we can sort of tend to ourselves, or when we're ready, start sending positive energy to the person who had harmed us, because we want to release ourselves from the bondage of unforgiveness, right? And when you're ready and you've done the work of processing, to start that practice. So that's a fantastic resource for whether you are the one who has done the harm or you are the one who has been harmed. This workbook has a lot of really good strategies in it that can kind of step you through it.
Yeah, and I want to go back to, is this resentment, like, again, excuse, blame shifting, whatever is justifying his inappropriate behavior. So please don't get caught up on that he's just
Yeah.
making excuses, but take care of
Yes,
you. So
absolutely.
this next one is a great question. And I know we're going to run out of time, but hopefully you can do this. I'm going to capture the rest of them and I'm going to ask you to come back and do part two. So I've been dragging resentments with me and my relationship for many years. They were originally based in fact, but I've added to them and made them grow and added to my own facts in order for the story to fit my anger, justification, and sense of entitlement. How can I get back to the facts and process the facts without the crap that I've added over the years? Thank you for asking this. I am
Oh.
so grateful you are here and asking this question.
I have so much
I'm tearing up.
respect. I
Yeah,
know, I
like,
know, I
yeah,
know.
seriously. Yeah.
What a good question. And I hope that everybody in here is able to hear. I mean, at some point you will hopefully be able to see how much wisdom there is in this question. And that sense of humility of, you know what? It started with facts and it snowballed, because that's what resentment does, right? It's that snake eating its own tail. It adds, it snowballs, it creates and sustains the anger and the rage, which is why it's so important that we address it as quickly as we can and find the relief. So I just want to just say how much I admire this participant for asking this question and being willing to be vulnerable and share that with everybody. I think it's just beautiful and very well said. So I just thrilled. How can I get back to the facts and process the facts without all of the crap that I've added over the years? Start with journaling. If your partner is still alive, if your partner or ex-partner would be willing to have this conversation with you, it will take a tremendous amount of humility and courage to step into a conversation with your partner and say, you know what, I realize that I have, in my anger and in my resentment, found a lot of things that is probably adding to the reality. And I wonder if you'd be willing to help clear some of that up with me, right? Would you be willing to talk about some of that? Yeah, that would be a really challenging conversation, and your partner may not be at a place that they're able to do that, right? So you may not ever be able to get back down to the facts, but the facts that really matter are, am I ready to forgive? Am I ready to engage in some of the work that I can be doing to heal and to release the things that I can release, right? The things that can be released. Am I ready to start doing that? And that's difficult work. It's hard work. Don't do it by yourself, right? Find other people who are also wanting to do that so that you can help encourage each other in that way, right? I run a forgiveness work group, and I only do it twice a year, usually February and September. It's closed now. I just started a couple weeks ago, but that's the kind of thing you want to look for is people who have a common goal of, I want to practice safe, healthy, responsible forgiveness that's not just minimizing what happened, that's not just ignoring the facts, right? Find the people who are really taking this seriously and doing a responsible approach to practicing forgiveness. And I think that there's a lot of people out there who want that. So, yeah.
And I'm going to invite you to start with forgiving yourself, because I bet that there's some stuff for you in this that you've added to the facts, and you've carried this and all of those things. So I'm going to invite you to start with like compassion for yourself of like, this is where I went. I was doing the best that I could, and I'm willing in this moment to quit lugging this stuff around. I'm willing to to work on freeing myself. These are shackles and chains. The person who's the most miserable is you with this. And I'm with Angela, like the facts, on some level, it doesn't matter. You've hung on to all this stuff. So it doesn't matter. Stuff was bad. And, whether it was this or this doesn't really matter. I think you've done enough. You've
Suffering.
carried enough of a load for long enough. So,
Yes.
just be willing to go, yeah, I don't need this. Nobody needs this. I
Yes.
deserve joy. I believe we all deserve joy in our lives, and to find that, that's the gift. And please know that you can have that too. So thanks for asking that question. I captured them all. Angela, great topic. I'm going to
Yeah.
invite Angela back. Watch for part 2. It'll start with these questions and any other new ones. So please reach out. We've got resources. Angela, I've already got people asking about the slides, so email them to me when you get a chance, and I will share them with anybody who has asked. So thank you, everyone. Great questions. Thanks for being here. We want to keep helping you on your journey. You keep joining us. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.